Artists who are watching, have you ever asked yourself the question, am I creating or am I just performing? That's a question I try to ask myself pretty consistently as a stand-up comedian, who by definition performs almost every night, but maybe doesn't create every time I perform. So let's talk about it. What's the difference between creating and performing? My name is Jack Freeman. I'm a stand-up comedian based in New York who you've never heard of, and I have a lot of experience in the arts, both in stand-up comedy and in other lesser forms of art like music, photography, and videography. So let's talk about it. What's the difference between creating and performing? I believe that creation is the act of bringing something new out of existing materials. Now that's kind of different than how a lot of people think of creation as bringing something out of the ether or bringing something completely out of inspiration or something supernatural. In my opinion, the creative act is about building something new out of the materials we find all around us. When we have that feeling of inspiration, of bringing something out of the air, pulling it out of nothing, I think really we're tapping into our subconscious and tapping into what we already know and feel and can relate about the world around us. So creating things doesn't necessarily need to be an act of supernatural power where we invent something new out of nothing, but instead it's beautiful because we take 1 + 1 to make 3. So let's use an example from stand-up comedy to talk about the act of creation. In stand-up comedy, there's something called riffing, which is when a comedian goes on stage and doesn't really know what they're going to talk about, but instead lets inspiration hit them in the face. Sometimes it takes the form of crowd work, which is when a comedian talks to the audience and asks provocative questions or questions trying to get interesting information out of the crowd in order to make a joke about that. You've definitely seen crowd work before, either because you've been to a comedy show or because you've seen the roughly 10 million crowd work clips on TikTok and YouTube and Instagram Reels, most of which are pretty mediocre. So riffing in crowd work is really an active improvisation, right? It's when a comedian is pulling something out of nothing and inventing a joke right on the spot, right? To pull back the curtain a little bit, a lot of comedians, myself included, we have background information that we can use to riff and improv on stage. That's the material that we go on stage with. So if I go on stage after another comedian and I make a joke that is based on a joke that they just told, it's because I thought of that joke when I was in the audience and then I immediately told that joke on stage. I didn't just pull it out of the ether, it was really based in some sort of material that I found. And I really think that that's actually how artists work. Like almost all artists find material just lying around and they take that material and turn it into something that they want to see. For example, my sister is a novelist. Her name is Kate Kavari. She writes cozy mysteries and fantasy books, and her work is wildly original, but it's also based in specific traditions, right? Like she can pull from specific things that she likes from different stories and different movies that she's seen, different pieces of music, and she takes that material from all these different places and creates something fundamentally new from it. That's the act of creation, and it's rad. Also, Kate would be very unhappy if I didn't put her website in the description to this video, so please click it. So if that's creation, then what's performing? And what's the difference between creating and performing? Performing is when you interpret something that's already been created. There are a ton of examples of this, like when a pianist is playing a concerto by Mozart, or whatever they do. That is not necessarily an act of creation, that's an act of performing. That's interpreting something that's already been created. And sure, interpretation can be a creative act if it's done in an original way, but it just isn't necessarily the same as creating something new. As a stand-up comic, I constantly feel the difference between creating and performing. The act of creation as a stand-up comic is when I find something new among the materials that are around me. That involves writing new jokes when I'm on stage, riffing and doing crowd work. These are acts of creation. Performing for me is when I go on stage and I say the words of the jokes that I've already written in a way that I know will elicit laughter. Dude, this is a stupid video. This is a stupid video. I'm gonna keep going, but I need to acknowledge to myself, to the audience, to everyone, that this is a little bit foofy even for me. Okay, so why are we even telling the difference between creating and performing? Is one better than the other? Yeah, kind of. As a stand-up comedian, I want to create every time I go on stage. I don't want to just perform my material A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I don't want to just play the hits, even though I know that the hits will elicit laughter in a specific way. That's not the act of creation. The act of creation is using that material to find something new with the audience every time I hit the stage. But does that mean that I have to write something new every time I hit the stage? Maybe, yeah. Maybe to be in the act of creation as a stand-up comic, I need to approach it like I'm going to find something new every single time I hit the stage. I'm going to bring myself to the stage, I'm going to bring my material to the stage, and I'm going to bring the audience with me as I try to find something new. I think that's the act of creation, and the reason why creation is fundamentally different and better than just performing when I'm on stage as a stand-up comic. So with your art, with your business, with your interpersonal relationships, and with your life, I want you to ask yourself the question, am I creating or am I just performing? Are you bringing the creative spirit to your life every single day by trying to discover something new about the people around you and piecing together the parts of your life in an interesting way? Or are you just going through life performing the part that other people want you to play? Am I creating or am I just performing? Thanks for watching.